know of death. Your perfect love is casting out fear. And even when I'm caught in the middle of the storms of this life, I won't turn back, I know you are near, and I will fear no evil, for my God is with me, and if my God is with me, whom then shall I fear, whom then shall I fear? Oh no, you never let go, through the calm and through the storm. Oh no, you never let go, in every high and every low. Oh no, you never let go, Lord, you never let go of me. And I can see a light that is coming for the heart that holds on, a glorious light beyond all compare. And there will be an end to these troubles, but until that day comes, we'll live to know you here on the earth, and I will fear no evil, for my God is with me, and if my God is with me, whom then shall I fear? Whom then shall I fear? Oh no, you never let go, through the calm and through the storm. Oh no, you never let go, in every high and every low. Oh no, you never let go, Lord, you never let go of me. Yes, I can see a light that is coming for the heart that holds on, and there will be an end to these troubles, but until that day comes, still I will praise you, still I will praise. I can see a light that is coming for the heart that holds on, and there will be an end to these troubles, but until that day comes, still I will praise you, still I will praise you. Oh no, you never let go, through the calm and through the storm. Oh no, you never let go, in every high and every low. Oh no, you never let go, Lord, you never let go of me. In need of grace, in need of love, in need of mercy raining down from high above, in need of strength, in need of peace, in need of things that only you can give to me. In need of Christ, the perfect Lamb, my refuge strong, the great I am. This is my song, my humble plea. I am your child, I am in need. In need of grace, in need of love, in need of mercy raining down from high above, in need of strength, in need of peace, in need of things that only you can give to me. In need of Christ, the perfect Lamb, my refuge strong, the great I am. This is my song, my humble plea. I am your child, I am my song, my humble plea. I am your child, I am in need. I am your child, I am in need. I still have joy, I still have joy, after all the things we've been through. I still have joy, and I still have joy, I still have joy, after all the things we've been through. I still have joy, I still have peace, I still have peace. After all the things we've been through, I still have peace, and I still have faith. I still have faith. After all the things we've been through, I still have faith. I still have hope. I still have hope. After all the things we've been through, I still have hope. I still have love, sweet love. I still have love. After all the things we've been through, I still have love. And I still have joy. I still have joy. I still have joy. After all the things we've been through. After all the things we've been through. After all the things we've been through, I still have joy. Every praise is to our God, every word of worship with one accord. Every praise is to our God. Sing hallelujah to our God, glory hallelujah is to our God. Every praise is to our God. Every praise is to our God. Every word of worship with one accord. Every praise is to our God. Sing hallelujah to our God. Glory hallelujah is to our God. Every praise is to our God. God my Savior, God my healer, God my deliverer. Yes He is, yes He is. God my Savior, God my healer, God my deliverer. Yes He is, yes He is, yes He is. God my Savior, God my healer, God my deliverer. Yes He is, yes He is, yes He is. Every praise is to our God. Every word of worship with one accord. Every praise is to our God. Sing hallelujah to our God. Glory hallelujah is to our God. Every praise is to our God. When I'm down, you are my glorious King. When I'm up and blessings abound, and your grace falls like rain. When your love and mercy surround, Lord, I will praise you again, my God, Redeemer and friend. When everything's right, I will praise you. In seasons of joy, I will sing, and even in trials, I'll still praise you, for you are my glorious King. Yes, you are my glorious King. You came for me in the form of a man, bearing my sins on a cross, taking the shame and fulfilling.
All right, everybody's quiet. That must mean it's time to start. Welcome back to class number 3 of our discussion in the book of Exodus. As I have on the screen, we will be talking about the burning bush here from Exodus chapter 3. And so if you look at our schedule here, technically we are here October 4th, but we're going to be reading and kind of combining a bit of these two classes here between today and on Wednesday, simply because the story of the burning bush does carry over into chapter 4, even though that really is more about preparing Moses to do this work there. Both the discussion in the burning bush transitions to that, as well as the other events there in chapter 4 really become about preparing Moses for his work there. We left off on Wednesday with this idea that at the end of Exodus chapter 2, we find this strange statement where it says, God saw the people of Israel and God knew. That is from the ESV. We talked about that depending on your translation, it probably read differently from that. So there are all of the different mainstream, anyway, versions that pretty much cover the gambit of how this is translated. And in there, I labeled that of them as read, because in all of the translations, that's added descriptions that were added by the translators there, that of them, it does not appear in the original, where the original really stops at that God knew in the ESV, or he took notice in the Holman Christian Standard there. And we talked just very briefly about how it's so hard to translate because a more literal translation of that would be God knows. But in our language, and if you were reading through that passage, it really doesn't make sense linguistically to say God knows. Because the previous part of that passage is talking about how that there was the suffering in Egypt, and the Israelites cried out to God because of their slavery to the Egyptians. And the more common translations there seem to fit better, that God recognized that and he knew that these things were happening to them. Kind of fits in with the language more. However, the more I study it, the more I do like that idea of anything that was happening, this God knows is in the same kind of language that we're going to talk about today, with that same basic language of I am. It's a present tense that wasn't just really present, it also meant he knew before and he's going to know afterwards. God always knows here. And I think that's what Moses, the way this was written here, and through the Spirit inspiring him, is saying, that even all these terrible things are happening, and we don't understand why, and we're crying out to God, and maybe for hundreds of years, they had been crying out to God, and they didn't get the answer that they were hoping for, but yet, just remember, God knows. God knows what's going on with you. He knows what's best for you. He knows what's best for his plan, even if that may not seem to be what's best for you. Think about in the book of Revelation, whenever there's that vision of, God's throne, and John is looking into God's throne, and he sees the 70 elders at the foot of the throne, and what are they screaming? Pleading with God. How long? Right? How long can we endure this suffering? And the answer there is, I'm going to take care of it, but remember, God knows what's going on here. And I think that's an important part for us to point out here. Okay, before I jump ahead and we begin the next section, I know it can be somewhat difficult to hear in here, and I'll do my best. Anybody have any comments or questions over chapter 2, birth of Moses, and his fleeing Egypt, before we get into chapter 3? All right, I don't usually do this a ton simply because it takes up a lot of time, but I do want to read this encounter in the burning bush in its entirety here up front. I'll read through it relatively quickly. So we're going to go ahead and read all of chapter 3 and the first 17 verses of chapter 4. I'm not going to put them up on the screen. I'd have been clicking for you to be able to read it up there. So chapter 3, beginning in verse 1. Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses, and he said, Here I am. Then he said, Do not come near, take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them out to that land, to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now, behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression which the Egyptians oppress them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? He said, "But I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain." Then Moses said to God, "If I come to the people of Israel and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' what shall I say to them?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am." And he said, "Say this to the people of Israel, 'I am has sent me to you.'" God also said to Moses, "Say this to the people of Israel, 'The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. Go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, 'The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I have observed you and what has been done to you in Egypt. And I promise that I will bring you out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. And they will listen to your voice, and you and the elders of Israel shall go to the king of Egypt and say to him, The Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Now let us please go out a 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless compelled by a mighty hand. So I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all the wonders that I will do in it. After that he will let you go. And I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. And when you go, you shall not go empty, but each woman shall ask of her neighbor, and any woman who lives in her house, for silver and gold jewelry and for clothing. You shall put them on your sons and on your daughters, so you shall plunder the Egyptians. Then Moses answered, But behold, they will not believe me nor listen to my voice. For they will say, The Lord did not appear to you. The Lord said to him, What is that in your hand? He said, A staff. And he said, Throw it to the ground. So he threw it to the ground, it became a serpent, and Moses ran from it. But the Lord said to Moses, Put out your hand and catch it by the tail. So he put out his hand and caught it, and it became a staff in his hand. That they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared unto you. And again the Lord said, Put your hand inside your cloak. And he put his hand inside his cloak. And when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous like snow. Then God said, Put your hand back inside your cloak. So he put his hand back inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. If they will not believe you, God said, or listen to the first sign, they may believe the latter sign. And if they will not believe even these two signs, nor listen to your voice, you shall take some water from the Nile and pour it on dry ground. And the water that you shall take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground. But Moses said to the Lord, O my Lord, I am not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and of tongue. Then the Lord said to him, Who has made man's mouth? Who made him mute, or deaf, or seeing, or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be your mouth, and teach you what you shall speak. But he said, O my Lord, please send someone else. Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, Is there not Aaron, your brother, the Levite? I know he can speak well. Behold, he is coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and I will teach you both what to do. He shall speak for you to the people, and he shall be your mouth, and you shall be as God to him. Take in your hand this staff with which you shall do the signs. I wanted to read that in its entirety just because this is such an important passage here as we read through this, understanding that it is one of the most exciting passages in the entire Old Testament. This is one of the very few times where we see God speaking directly to a man face to face, as it were, here. And it's really the beginning of this very special relationship between God and Moses. So special that later on in Exodus chapter 33 and verse 1, does anybody remember how that relationship between Moses and God is characterized when they talk? For Moses talked to God as a friend does face to face to another man. Okay? So very special relationship here that's going to begin right at this burning of the bush. And of course, this is one of the great stories that we teach our children right from the beginning. It's been made into so many movies. I think I've said before that I really do like, even though there's some things that are very questionable in it, of course, that Disney movie, The Prince of Egypt. I really do think it's very true to the overall story. And this is one of the sections of that movie that just really kind of moves me to see Moses reacting to God, and God is angry and yells back at him, "Who made man? Who made the mouth, the dumb, the blind, and the deaf?" And Moses cringes back from that anger, and I just can't imagine having God yell at me like that. But then God turns around and comforts Moses and tells him, "Don't worry, I'm going to be with you, and you are going to go to Pharaoh, and you are going to do my wonders." It's just a very moving scene there, and just makes this passage all the more special to me. So, of course, at the beginning of the chapter then, we find Moses doing what? Being a shepherd, and he's tending to the flock, right? Okay. So he's tending to the flock of Jethro. And again, we said Jethro last class really means His Excellency. So it could have been a title, not so much his first name there. And this happens, and I'm going to answer some of these questions here. I always pose them as questions, but I think we're just going to go ahead and I'll answer most of them. It happens there on the west side of the wilderness, and at Mount Horeb, which it calls here the mountain of God. In fact, during the intercourse there on